All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council special meeting for Monday, November 25th. I call this meeting to order. If you're able to do so, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. City Clerk, if you could please take roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson. Member Neunenkamp.
Present.
Member Prang.
Present.
Member Russell.
Present.
Member Ward.
Present.
Member Wright.
Present.
Mayor Sierra.
Present.
Let the record show 6 present, 1 absent.
Thank you very much, Deputy City Clerk. Moving on to agenda item 4. This is Director of Public Works Victor Rachael and Traffic Engineer Adam Maxwell here to provide a update on the Vision Zero project. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us here today. And we're going to provide an update on Vision Zero and also have some consideration we'd like some feedback on. So what we're going to talk about today, some of this is going to be a little bit redundant, but we're going to talk about the challenge, the Vision Zero approach, education and enforcement, engineering, enforcement, and then that consideration item that we have for council. So the challenge, some statistics here. So from 2022, the Federal Highway Administration estimates over 42,000 people died in motor vehicle crashes. And that is a slight decrease from 2021, however, still a very high number nationally. As we drill down into the regional section of accidents and data, on Denver roadways between 2013 and 2017, over 1,100 people were killed and over 8,800 seriously injured. And then if we look at specifically at 2017 on the right-hand side of your slide there, over 266 people were killed in crashes in the Denver area in that year. Drilling down even further, at the local level, and this data is from Dr. Cog from 2018 to 2022. We had over 3,800 crashes in Englewood, 11 fatalities, and 68 serious injuries. Now, this data, as you notice, does lag a little bit. It takes a while for reporting agencies to coordinate with local jurisdictions as well as Colorado State Patrol to get that data updated and into the system. On the right-hand side is a map of all the accidents that Dr. Cog tracks through the data. You'll notice, just looking at that, a north-south focus as well as one east-west. So the north-south would be Broadway, and the east-west is kind of on the northern side there, and that's 285. Jumping into the Vision Zero approach. So it's really retooling what we know is the traditional approach. Traditional approach was that traffic deaths are inevitable. Vision Zero says they're preventable and that there's no expense too great in saving lives. It's looking at engineering and solutions, again, kind of going back to those 3 E's, which we'll touch on, as a way to approach these types of issues. And again, Vision Zero not being a tagline is really a fundamentally different way to approach traffic safety as a whole. It includes that safe system approach. It's your planning and policymakers and how we look at things as a system. It's the individual road users and being responsible, taking that individual responsibility on, and then understanding that there are mistakes out there and looking at policy, safety improvements, and design criteria to improve safety on our roadway network. Dr. Cog has a Vision Zero approach and has 6 principles, which are listed on the screen for you there. You know, deaths and serious injuries are unacceptable. Humans make mistakes. We're all vulnerable. Responsibility is shared between the drivers. And when we look at these engineering policies and practices, we can approach safety from a proactive manner, and redundancy is critical. And again, those 3 E's, which we're going to touch on tonight: education, engineering, and enforcement. So Dr. Cog, as I mentioned, has adopted a Vision Zero approach in 2020, and it's a commitment to reduce those fatalities and severe injuries on our roadways, making it safe for all. education and engagement, and I'm going to turn it over to Adam for this portion.
Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Maxwell, your traffic engineering manager. So as we cover the first E, it has typically been education, so education, engineering, enforcement. But we're recommending that the education component be changed to engagement with a focus on providing information to the community while also engaging them in the decision making. So it's a two-way process. It isn't we're telling you this, we're telling you this. Let's work together. Let's have some engagement, some ideas exchanged amongst or between us. Many projects are in the works. The first of which, as part of our strategic plan, is to develop and implement infrastructure policies to reduce traffic fatalities and serious injuries. We are in the process of updating our engineering design guidelines and the requirements with the timeline of finishing up in the first part of 2025. Updated policies and code have been completed regarding construction zones already. The last one shown on this slide is institutionalize Vision Zero through the establishment of an internal committee to review crash data and make recommendations to implement changes. So we've got it here on the slide that it's in progress. The first internal Vision Zero working group will meet in early November. Well, we've actually met, so we did meet in the second week. We had our first stakeholder meeting, our internal stakeholder, if you will. We'll continue to coordinate and work with PD in that group to identify troublesome intersection locations and look at appropriate solutions. So the next part of our strategic plan is to conduct a formal Vision Zero campaign. That's also in progress. The campaign is already really in the works to be kicked off in the first part of January 2025. We'll be meeting with communications to take a further look at that and move that forward. We have been making social media posts regarding pedestrian safety already, but we will be upping that in January 2025 and providing more information about what we're up to. Also part of our strategic plan is to continue engaging with Englewood schools. We are looking at safety school zone assessments at Clayton and Bishop. They're both, the data's been collected, Clayton's been finalized, and we're talking about that now, and Bishop is being finalized. So we have analyze both of those school zones. Another part of our plan is to develop an internal framework to review data and make decisions to improve safety. We have, as I mentioned, had our first internal Vision Zero working group. That's a group of city employees and Englewood schools, as well as the police department. We met here in the city, here in the center, and that was a pretty exciting meeting. The next part of our strategic plan is to continue to be transparent, provide the public with information on our safety enhancements, pathways to request signs and signals and markings. Those updates are provided through our city website, and we continue to provide those updates as they become available. So we talked about engaging. Well, what would be some of those strategies as part of that E? So rather than education, it's, again, as we're branding our strategy, it's engaging. We've begun, well, we already have a great relationship with Englewood Public Schools. We're looking to increase our partnerships with the community. We're talking about hosting some events next year. And we're also beginning to engage greater with our Englewood Transportation Advisory Committee, our ETAC, about Vision Zero, as well as asking for suggestions on how we can best engage the community. We're talking about workshops, engaging with the neighbors, and having myself and some other traffic folks out at neighborhood nights next year. And then some other strategies, which we'll show you here in a moment. There are some things being done in some neighboring states, like installing crossing flags at crosswalks for some troublesome intersections. We'll talk about that briefly. And we're looking forward to some community assessments of walkability and bikeability. And the last one here is piloting some safety demonstration and intervention projects. So these are the crossing flags idea. This is something being done in the state of Washington. So in the middle slide, you can see that there's a crossing guard with the stop paddle, which is what we do here in Englewood already. This particular location shown here is a little bit of a wider street with a median, as you can see, and with a crossing guard on the one side of the street stopping the directional traffic. They've added additional emphasis here by having the school-age children grab some little flags to not only empower them to be in the crosswalk, but to really increase their visibility. They get excited about these sorts of things, and we are too. So again, it's typically an education component, but we're shifting our focus to be engaging rather than just a one-sided conversation. As part of that, we talked a little bit about the communications that's been ongoing through our website and such, but we are working with the communications team here at the city to develop the engagement plan. Progress has been made early on, and we're setting up our meeting in January 2025 to talk about what those updates will be that we'll share with you all as we move forward in 2025. And we're having discussions about coordinating a multi-agency event with a focus on Vision Zero, something like maybe we would invite our partners from Arapahoe County, or maybe Dr. Cog come out as well and talk to them about their regional Vision Zero effort and how that impacts all of us. So we'll continue to work with communications on those announcements and modifications to roadways like we have been. We've got some projects in the works that we'll be giving some updates as well next year. Mr. Victor.
All right, on the engineering side, as you know, full, thank you. As you're aware, we do have traffic calming approved in the 2025 budget, which we're very excited about. We'll be rolling out an RFP to engage with a consultant to help us develop that plan, including community and stakeholder input as we put the plan together. And then we also have that $250,000 that was approved by council. Thank you for implementation of traffic calming devices to go into the community, as well as to support safe routes to school, any grants that we're pursuing in that manner. We also have our Complete Streets and Streets for Everyone. So we have the South Broadway Complete Streets project, which is under design, as well as the Old Hamden project, with the goal there of meeting the needs of the community and serving every user, whether you're a cyclist or maybe you're mobility challenged or you want a wider walk. So the goal with those Complete Streets projects there is to meet all needs and mobility in those corridors. Some further updates here as it relates to the engineering E, the Oxford pedestrian bridge. So that's actually out to bid now with the funding coming in from the adjacent development, and we're anticipating construction there to start in the first part of 2025, which is an exciting project to see come to fruition. We have reviews of high fatality and high collision areas, looking at those risk factors. That's continuing coordination with PD, as Adam touched on, to look for engineering solutions. If we're seeing patterns, can we modify the traffic signal? Can we look at curb radii? Is there an engineering factor there that can be taken into effect to eliminate or significantly reduce those collisions and any issues at those intersections? Green buffers on streets. So we've got a couple of bike lanes, most recently out on Floyd. We have a protected buffer there for bike lanes. In line with our walk and wheel plan, we'll be looking for future opportunities there with the funding that was approved in the walk and wheel in 2025. Looking at developing bike and pedestrian friendly transportation corridors. So we have the rail trail project currently in process and design. We're looking at missing sidewalks, addressing those, making sure we have connections. So both pedestrians and bicyclists, people using commuting methods other than vehicular, aren't stranded and run out of sidewalk there and can get to where they want to go. And then developing that internal framework, looking at those 3 E's and that working group that Adam touched on. So we've already met once. We anticipate another meeting coming in December or in January, depending on timing and when we can get everybody back in consideration of the holidays. Already touched on the traffic calming toolbox, and then seeking out grants. We're going to continue to look for grants and opportunity there to leverage our dollars against both additional state and federal dollars that may be available to help us in the transportation realm. Old Hamden Complete Streets. I know there was an update provided recently, but we did hold that open house. 60% plans are complete, and we're continuing to advance that design. South Broadway, Again, open house held in April, 60% design and advancing. And then the South Broadway mid-block crossing, that's the rectangular rapid flashing beacon that we're converting to a hawk or pedestrian hybrid signal. That design is in progress, and they just finished boring and checking for utilities via what's called a subsurface utility investigation. With that and enforcement, I'm going to hand it over to Vance.
Great, thanks, Victor. I'll go over briefly some of the enforcement strategies and kind of what we're doing. You see a heat map here on this slide. This heat map has not changed very much in recent years at all. You can see that it's Santa Fe and Dartmouth in the upper left-hand side, a little bit of Broadway coming down south, and then most of our accidents right now are really centered along the 285 corridor between Broadway and Santa Fe. We work with Public Works, specifically with high accident location school zones, and then special traffic areas that we get citizen complaints on. All of our uniform patrol division can and does enforce traffic violations as call load allows, and traffic enforcement is just one facet of what we consider our highly visible proactive policing philosophies. Our traffic team is made up of 3 officers that are dedicated to traffic enforcement. They also utilize 2 portable speed trailers. We've spoke about those last time. These speed trailers are great to get people's attention because it does show what their speed is and what the speed limit is, and then we gather data from those speed trailers. We share that data with Adam Maxwell and his team, and they then go and if it further warrants it, they've got other ways to more surreptitiously measure the traffic there that's not, so people don't know that they're being monitored via a tube system. So we do put those out mostly based on neighborhood complaints. One of the things we did, our traffic officers, they do completed special training with the State Patrol, reference commercial vehicles, and just in September, they performed a port of entry random inspection on commercial vehicles going through the city. They routed over 150 commercial vehicles through the port of entry that we set up with State Patrol that day, and they discovered over 111 traffic violations on those commercial vehicles. 16 of those were actually out of service violations where those vehicles were towed. Those were based on driving a commercial motor vehicle without the proper license, inoperable brake lights, unsecured cargo, and overweight. They also cited several drivers for not wearing seatbelts, distracted driving, and even some driving under suspension. So that's just one of the special projects that our traffic team does for our commercial vehicles that are traveling through the city. Our previous top 5 accident locations have not changed in many years. You can tell that all of them are on CDOT controlled roadways, Santa Fe and Dartmouth being number 1, Santa Fe and Union being number 2, Broadway and Bellevue number 3, and then 285 at Inca and 285 in Galapago 4 and 5. Previously we did talk about this. We saw a drastic drop in accidents on the 285 corridor east of Broadway to Clarkson, and that was really a combination of the 3 E's. And you can see that based on a lot of the signage that is up and down 285 right there between Broadway and Clarkson with, you know, if you're going eastbound, no left turn onto some of the side streets on some of the heavier parts of the day, and there was a lot of engineering that went into those that got our accidents down there. I did get some numbers, and year to date in 2024, we've had 2 fatal accidents in the city, and I don't have the locations in front of me, but we've had 2 fatals in 2024. Is this one mine? When we talk about some strategic plans, we're working with Public Works on some transportation safety related goals. Those are throughout the strategic plan, so they're not in just one location in the plan. We do collaborate again with Public Works, and that's an ongoing project in the strategic plan. That's the one where we actually go through and collect a lot of the traffic data and then work with Public Works on what we should do there. And then again, we already had our first internal Vision Zero working group meeting in November, and we've worked with the other city departments on some framework, and that was just a kickoff meeting. Again, we've already talked about that, sharing data, And then we've already talked about that again, about reviewing some updated accident data. We're waiting until January to update our 5 accident locations again to get some more causation so we can have a full year's worth of data before we update those high accident locations.
Thank you, Vance. So for council consideration tonight, I'm happy to answer questions about the whole presentation, but one thing that we're really looking for was council's review and feedback on projects to date, those planned in the future, while also providing some direction about formal goals, and then changing that E in education. And also talking about, at a high level, developing maybe a different name for the program, if that's the direction council wants to go. Adam touched on it earlier. We were working with communications, and we have Slade under contract to help us with the program. They helped with the Flow It Forward program. They're going to be helping us with this discussion around Vision Zero. So any feedback you have tonight or in the future, we certainly love to hear about thoughts and ideas around naming the program, as well as that conversion on the E for education and engagement. Just real quick, just some examples of other names that are, while the goal is very similar to Vision Zero, some other names that are out there. So Littleton there has adopted a plan called Safer Streets Littleton, which, again, the general goal is the same as Vision Zero, but under a different title. And then on the right-hand side, Washington has Target Zero, is something that they've adopted as their naming convention for their plan. And with that, happy to answer questions or.
Perfect, yeah. Sounds
any
great.
additional
Adam,
feedback?
Victor, Deputy Chief, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll start off with Member Noonekamp and then Member Ward. Go ahead, Member Noonekamp.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. This has been an ongoing topic, and it's great to hear this update. Especially, I liked the updates on the projects and where we are on everything. A couple of questions. Since you brought up the new Floyd protected lanes specifically, we have had, I think, only one citizen come to a council meeting and share that they are not happy with that change. Are you aware of any other citizen feedback we've had from pedestrians or cyclists on how they're using that new infrastructure and if they're liking the way that it's designed?
Excuse me, thank you for the question. That is the only feedback that I'm aware of. After we received that feedback, I personally went out and observed, one, the bus turning, and I apologize, maybe it's Galapago, I'm trying to think of the cross street there, as well as the King Soopers entrance. So those were two things that were kind of brought up in some of the comments. So I went out and watched multiple buses make the turns, as well as went over to King Soopers, as well as we met internally to look at other feedback that staff may have received through the process. And from any other perspective on the bus side, we did not modify one of the corners where there was a concern. And then at the King Soopers entrance, there's thresholds for requiring, I'll say, a left turn lane, meeting those minimum thresholds. Operations, based on my personal observations and those of staff at different times of day, to make sure we cover the full spread, seem to be working without issue.
That's helpful. And then just one follow-up. Can you refresh my memory on what does the citizen engagement look like when we're designing these engineering projects on the front end?
Sure. So anytime we're designing a project, we do a couple of things. So we stand up a website, we put the project manager's information, so there's contact information out there. We try and hold multiple at public engagement meetings, whether that's going out into the community, holding them here, or a combination of both to make sure we're getting them out there. There's also some projects will do surveys. Some projects will try and do like a walk and talk of the corridor, depending on the project. Just to solicit that feedback and engage. Also then, again, specific to the corridor, reaching out to businesses, or if it's along a residential corridor, it could be door hangers, and then meeting those residents to understand and explain the project and implications along the roadway frontage.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And then my last question is the 3 E's. Is that an Englewood structure, or is that a more well-known or well-used concept?
I would say that's a more well-known concept. You see that in a lot of the traffic engineering world. You see the 3 E's out there.
And are other cities going to engage instead of educate?
That's a great question. I do not know the answer off the top of my head. We can look at it. We felt like for Englewood, we really wanted to do both, but do more engagement and educate at the same time, but really wanting to pivot more in that nature.
That's helpful. I understand that it's a concept, it's something that we're using to help talk about the work. We could just add engagement and have 4 E's, but I wasn't sure if you guys had considered that or kind of where that change came from, but that's helpful.
I had, in talking to Director Rachael and Engineer Maxwell, I had suggested that we consider changing it from education to engagement, and the real reason being that it sounded like council had been getting a lot of feedback from the community around community members wanting to be involved in the design of things that happen in their neighborhood, wanting to have their hands on it. And so like our COG, other COGs across the country often help cities do workshops. I've actually participated in a few where it's like a Saturday walkability workshop, or you literally walk around a neighborhood and talk about what the issues are. And so we really didn't want it to just be one way. Of course, education will still be a part of that E, but we were recommending to council that you consider engagement, really just because of the sense that we got, at least that at the staff level at council meetings, that the community really wants to be a part of these decisions.
That's really helpful context. Thank you.
Member Ward.
I'll start with the part that I'm perhaps most passionate about, which is the name. The first time this project came in front of us, I remember informing the people from Public Works that I'm not fond of the Vision Zero name in general, largely because it is used by Denver, but also because I really hate it when people try to establish goals that are impossible to achieve. It is absolutely impossible for us in any world to ensure that there are 0 fatalities or injuries from car wrecks in our city. So when we proclaim that we have a goal of achieving that, we declare that we are planning on failing. And I don't like that at all. So I would pick pretty much anything other than that. I think that the goal of consistently declining the number of fatalities and injury accidents is possible. And I would support something that indicates that that would be our goal, because I think over time we have opportunity to do that. But the Vision Zero plan does not resonate with me. It just speaks to what Denver has done, which is making driving much less convenient in the place where I live. Aside from that, the other thing that I am interested in is our enforcement scheme. And I've talked to the city manager and the police department about this a number of times behind the scenes. Ultimately, I would like to see at critical points in the day, which is when children are arriving and children are leaving, a phalanx of police officers at or near our schools, just to send a direct message to the community that you don't screw around in your car when you're close to a school. You don't run the stop sign. You don't do 30 miles an hour when the speed limit is 20. There are children about during those times, and children are unpredictable, as are a number of our drivers. And I would much rather see a patrol car parked at the corner of Delaware and Tufts patrolling the traffic at Clayton Elementary than that same patrol car parked at the high accident intersection of Bellevue and Broadway watching adults go to and fro. So those are just my opinions on enforcement. I recognize that we have a lot of schools in this city, and it's not possible for us to be everywhere all at once. But in the grand scheme of priorities, being highly visible in and near our schools when schools are in session, particularly during the pickup and drop-off times, I think will have a very sizable effect on the way people drive in our community.
Member Ward, if I may, for sure, that is actually happening and has been happening for quite some time. Every morning, our traffic officers on the motorcycles or in the cars are doing extra patrols at as many of the schools as they can, as call load allows, and then our patrol officers are as well. I hear literally every single morning regular patrol officers calling out on extra patrols at X elementary school on a daily basis. So that is occurring on a very, very regular basis at the schools.
Awesome, and I'll note that I have seen them. So rather than phrasing that as some sort of complaint, I would like to stay the course on that.
Absolutely.
I can see them from my front window, and when I see the red and blue lights that I usually dread when I'm driving in my car, I smile in the morning because someone else is getting pulled over.
Thank you, sir.
Member Russell.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions. So who who is on the Vision Zero working group?
Yes, Councilmember Russell, thank you for the question. So it is Public Works. We have representatives from the engineering team, traffic operations, traffic engineering, and then we have PD represented. We have Englewood Schools, the superintendent and their safety officer are represented. Trying to think of who else, city manager's office. We've talked about pulling in parks on specific topics related to park entrances and operations, as well as rec center operations and things of that nature.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then I kind of had this question on the local where it talks about the number of crashes. That screen was close to the beginning. There were 3,833 crashes in Englewood, 11 fatalities, and 68 serious injuries. That was between 2018 and 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, and I really think this would be a good thing for the entire working group to focus on, do we have the data for all of those crashes that occurred, and even the 2 fatalities that have occurred this year? Would traffic calming measures have reduced the number or severity of these accidents? How many were DUIs? How many were distracted drivers? How many were speeding? Some of these things we cannot fix without enforcement, and I think enforcement has been one of my major issues, and I think that's been better. The changing the E from education to engagement, I like that a whole lot. And the reason is, when we're educating, we're telling the public, this is what we're doing and this is why you ought to follow. The public wants to know that you're listening to them and that they're going to have an input. And so I think that that's important. Let's see. There was another one, and Deputy Chief Fender, on the list of 5 intersections, did Logan and 285 used to be pretty high on the list?
It was, yeah, previously. It has been off the list for about, going to the Wayback Machine, maybe 4 or 5 years, perhaps. It was really overtaken by Santa Fe and Union, I think, was one that really popped up over the last few years that wasn't there prior. But if I can, the causation of almost all of the accidents at those top 5 accident locations are rear end accidents. Almost, I would say, from looking at the data, 80+% of the accidents at all 5 of those locations are rear end accidents, which are all distracted drivers. That's all that is. It's not the left turn violations. It's not the running of the red light. However, those are more indicative of our injury or fatal accidents. So the red light violations, the bad left turns, those, even though they are significantly smaller statistically, are most responsible for most of the serious injuries.
I appreciate that. And I actually notice that Dartmouth doesn't have issues. At least not high traffic issues.
At Dartmouth and Santa Fe? I'm sorry.
Well, no, Dartmouth farther east, between Broadway and University.
Sure.
I think maybe there are accidents there, but I just want to know that we're not changing things just to be changing things if those things we're doing aren't creating a problem. And I definitely agree with Councilmember Ward. I am totally opposed to Vision Zero. It came from Sweden. We are nothing like Sweden here. And I want to do things to keep our city safe, but I also think that we shouldn't be doing things that we don't need to do. So I think that's it for now. If I have some more, I'll push my button later. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback.
Member Wright?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here and asking questions. My other council members asked a lot of my questions. One of them I have is the fatalities, are a large portion of them motorcycle fatalities? Or is that more on the Sheridan side of 285?
I don't know that it's a large portion. I mean, it is statistically a portion, but I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head.
And I'm more on the west side of 285, and I would say during the summer, leaving council quite often or city events,
No.
probably on the Sheridan side.
I think even this year, the one of our fatals was a motorcycle accident, but that was at 285 in Clarkson.
Okay, so I think it's more on the Sheridan side that
It may be.
unfortunately, we see a lot of fatalities. One of my questions, engagement, I like the engagement. One of my concerns with engagement is the work-study group. Why would we not have our stakeholders as part of that engagement in that study group, bringing them in? They may have ideas and thoughts. They may have had a name to come up with. Why wouldn't we not bring them in as part of the study group?
We do anticipate that as part of the engagement process that we're working on with the consultant and communications, bringing in our community stakeholders.
Okay, and then, so I had little tabs, they took my tabs away from me. So one of the questions I did as you were giving your presentation is for your open houses, and I believe there were 2 that you had. How were those communicated, and estimating how many people do you think showed up for those?
Are you speaking about the open houses for engineering projects?
Yes, for the complete streets, I guess.
Sure, I'd have to get specifics for you, but generally, we do a couple of things. One, we put it out on social media. We'll do mailers to homes. And then we've talked about, and I don't know that these got incorporated this time, but putting things in the city's newsletters that go out on email blasts, as well as if there's time, trying to get things into the utility bill as well.
Okay. And has the turnout been pretty good with those?
The one that I'm most familiar with was the most recent for the Old Hamden. It was held at Grow and Gather.
Right.
I believe they had somewhere between 40 and 60 engagements.
And that's pretty good, actually.
It was a pretty good turnout.
Yeah. Okay. And let me just do a double check. I think member Russell said something when I was reading the council communication, and then I did some looking myself where Sweden kind of started this. I think when I was looking at Sweden, their streets are much narrower than ours, but they also have much smaller cars. Their houses are even smaller than ours and stuff. So I guess part of, in this whole thing, I understand wanting to make everything safer, but do we put people on bikes at risk when we have bigger cars in our trucks, let's say, and our mirrors stick out? Are we putting bikers at risk with the mirror sticking out further on, hitting them, for example, if we're narrowing our streets?
Yeah, good question. So I would say that design practices take into account, it's called shy distance. So bike lanes are significantly wider than your typical bicycle, so that you have the distance to kind of shy left or right as you come up on parked cars. You have passing cars, could be trees, could be signage, and those kinds of things. So those are taken into account in the design criteria.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess we just need to think of a name, huh?
Member Wright, if I may, I was just advised by our detective sergeant here in attendance that both of our fatal accidents this year so far have been motorcycles. One was at 285 in Clarkson, and one was at Bates and Tejon.
Okay. And unfortunately, I think youth and speed had something to do with that, so, okay. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Member Pring.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I too am not a fan of the Vision Zero name. I do think that that should be changed. I agree with Member Ward, like trying to advertise something that we might not attain is maybe a little foolish, but would be wonderful to be able to celebrate. Were we to be surprised and hugely successful with this campaign, and regarding the three E's, I don't have an issue changing to engagement. I do think that as much as possible, we should attempt to have EPD be the face of a lot of that engagement. I think on topics like this in our community specifically, people would gravitate toward engaging these topics more if it's a police officer that they get to talk to. Sorry, Public Works, but I just, what
No
I
offense
see out
taken.
at our public events is, there's a lot of excitement with
Sure.
kids and families being able to talk to EPD around these issues. Regarding the working group, I think it would be helpful for me as a council member, as I understand the meetings that you've held are kind of a kickoff meeting, and you've got the groups together, but as we proceed, being able to have an update on kind of what those discussions were, how that group in particular has enhanced the design of this plan, or how the plan is evolving over time, and where we're getting like kind of the best feedback from that working group to enhance this work. I think that's all I had on that piece. And then one question so we recently had the 60% design review for Old Hamden Complete Streets. Have we had that for South Hamden or the Sherman?
For South Broadway?
Or South Broadway? Are we going to get that soon? I feel like I haven't, or I don't recall us having an update on that anytime recently.
Yeah, we have not yet. I would say that one's a little bit further behind in design and from a timeline, but something we could certainly try and schedule with council. My guess is it'd probably be first of the year,
Okay,
just based on schedule and depending on where the project is. But yeah, we'd be happy to bring that forward.
okay, perfect. And then I guess my last thought is, do we have anywhere on the website, so if we're shifting the education E to more engagement, but we're obviously still gonna be doing the education piece, do we have like a ticker on the website or a page specific to this to kind of give that global education of how does Vision Zero or whatever we end up calling it tie into our Complete Streets projects, et cetera, et cetera? Like, do we have a place that houses all of that? Who's largely involved from the city? So listing out EPD, Public Works, et cetera, so people know who are in that working group and having the conversations around this. And then I'm thinking like eventually some sort of way to have some statistics, whether it's like a little running banner on our website or something that pops up or is in a special event pop out somewhere that occasionally throughout the year we could throw a statistic out there. For me personally, I would love to be able to shame those rear enders. Having been the recipient of a rear end right in downtown Englewood, sometimes that is education. Sometimes just pointing out, like, here are statistics of, the most injuries that we have from car accidents in Englewood, and this is largely what we're seeing drive that. Just kind of highlighting that out there, I think sometimes can be helpful, and being a little facetious with the shaming people, but not really. So I guess those would be my thoughts right now. Thank you.
Yeah, real quick, thank you for your feedback and comments. We are working on standing up a webpage dedicated to this, trying to be conscious of the naming convention and making sure that we're aligned, and will be one of the goals we're working on with our consultant and the communications team. We do have, as was touched in there, we have a Q&A under Public Works that talks about various aspects, which include some of the engineering things in Public Works, like talking about parking and how do you go about certain things, and trying to inform the public of processes and next steps as it relates to engineering and traffic and things of that nature. But we do envision a dedicated page to this program with the information that you've touched on.
Member Newcomb, did you still have a question or nope? Member Russell.
Thank you. I just have a couple more comments. Is Englewood in control of the timing of the lights on Hampton, on 285, or not?
We are not.
Can we work with them? I mean, the timing of those lights, I hate Hampton and I rarely take it. But I wonder if the timing of the lights is creating some problems for the rear end collisions.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. We can certainly reach out to CDOT and we have actually on a number of occasions. CDOT recently just took those over and replaced the controllers, and they're standing up, or they may have completed communications to the controllers from their central traffic management system. So it's absolutely something to consider. I would also go further to say even along Santa Fe, there's probably some opportunities there for some signal timing adjustments to maybe help with some of the accident patterns that we're seeing. So while we don't have control, we certainly do talk to CDOT on a regular basis on a number of things and can make some recommendations.
Okay, I appreciate that. And Deputy Chief Fender, this is, I have been saying this ever since I got on council about asking if we needed more patrol officers. And I think that that is something that you all ought to evaluate. Because I think if we were doing more regular enforcement, we wouldn't have to do it all the time, just enough to make people slow down or obey the laws. So that is just my question. Do we need some more patrol officers?
That's a great question, and I'll answer it the way I've probably answered it every other time. Is I'd really love to get to maximum staffing, and see what that looks like for a while, and get to our staffing levels to see exactly what that looks like, and until I would work with Chief Jackson to say, hey, here's our numbers, here's our calls for service numbers, and here's what we need. Right now, I would just really like to get fully staffed, see what that looks like for a little bit. It has been, as you know, and we've talked about this, since we've gotten our traffic unit fully staffed at 3, our traffic contacts have gone way up. I think the last time I looked, we were on track to almost double the amount of traffic contacts or traffic stops we've made from 2023 to 2024. So that has made a huge difference for us, being fully staffed in our traffic unit. But as I said, our patrol officers are also responsible for traffic enforcement, and I'd just love to get us fully staffed to that level for a little bit until we start going down that road. But I do actually appreciate the conversation.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, perfect. Just a couple comments and then a question. So in terms of engagement, Adam, the other group that you may want to reach out to, and I could reach out to them as well, is Bicycle Colorado. I'm not sure, it's been a while since I last spoken to them, but they used to provide some type of trainings for the schools, and this was 2 or 3 years ago. So they're an advocate, obviously, for cycling around town. So they may be another resource. I'll be happy to talk to Dr. Cog as well if you'd like me to. Regarding where this project falls under, I'm assuming this falls under the strategic plan for transportation, correct?
And safety, I would say.
And safety?
It's kind of,
Okay.
It's in both.
And kind of to piggyback on Member Prang's point, I like to see some metrics tied to this on what specifically it is that we're doing year over year to improve whatever we decide to call Vision Zero. Whether it's how many miles or how many feet of sidewalk we've improved, how many painted or protected bike lanes we've added, all these different aspects that we're looking to do. I like to see some metrics so we're able to point to the community. This is exactly this is what we did last year. This is what we're striving for next year. So we can actually have some numbers that we can provide that basically state, we are hearing you. This is what we plan to do about it. So bull belts, all of that would be something that I like to track as we move forward with this project. So,
Thank you.
all right. Anything else from members of council? Did we answer everything that you needed, Victor, Adam, Deputy Chief?
I believe so. Thank you. Appreciate all the feedback. As we continue with our engagement early in 2025, we anticipate not engaging with our stakeholders, but then coming back and engaging with council on that process as we land on a name.
Sounds great. Adam, Victor, Deputy Chief, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. All right, moving on next to City Attorney Tamara Niles, here to provide an update on the natural medicine businesses and potential city regulations.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the third presentation tonight that you're receiving on natural medicines, hopefully the last. But of course, we'll bring it back as many times as council would like. And just a refresher on the background of natural medicines, in November 2022, Proposition 122 was adopted by the people of Colorado in a statewide vote. In May 2023, the state legislature adopted Senate Bill 23-290 regarding natural medicine regulations. And that legislation allows for supervised use of natural medicines, which are otherwise known as psychedelic mushrooms, at state licensed facilities referred to as natural medicine healing centers. The operation of businesses is also covered regarding the cultivation, manufacturing, and testing of natural medicines. So I thought it'd be helpful to say exactly what we can and can't do, what got us to this point tonight. And this came up in public comment, of course, and Councilmember Ward stated it correctly. Local governments cannot prohibit natural medicine uses. Clearly, we cannot do that. The people of the state of Colorado have spoken, and we can't change that voice. However, local governments can enact regulations regarding time, place, and manner on the uses, as long as those regulations are not unreasonable or conflict with state law. So for example, we couldn't adopt regulations that would have the effect of prohibiting natural medicines within the city of Englewood. For example, we couldn't adopt a 3,000-foot buffer from a list of uses that mean no location would qualify within the city. The state of Colorado intends to start issuing licenses at the beginning of 2025 for natural medicine healing centers and for cultivation businesses. So if we are going to adopt regulations locally regarding time, place, and manner, we need to adopt those sometime in December. And here are the prior 4 times that you've seen natural medicine uses. So what is natural medicine? Psilocybin, which is a psychedelic compound found in over 200 species of fungi, and psilocin, this is not one that I've heard pronounced, which is also present in most psychedelic mushrooms. Now, this was a question that Council Member Prang had a few weeks ago, is there are additional things that can be legalized on or after June 1, 2026. The state board can also, and approved by the executive director, can approve dimethyltryptamine, which occurs in many plants, and or mescaline, which is found in cactus, but not including peyote. In addition, ibogaine can be included as natural medicine if it again is approved by the board and the executive director. But so for right now, we're just looking at psilocybin and psilocin. So the state will issue several licenses. The state regulations have really been focused on the business side for training and licensing. So natural medicine healing centers, testing facilities, cultivation. The state has also developed a facilitator training program license, natural medicine handler license, and then the applicable laws also state other. So the state could potentially implement additional licenses as well. I did look, the state already has a place where you can look on their website to see what licenses have been issued. And so the state has issued facilitator training program licenses. I was just curious, so I thought you would be too, is who's actually going to be training the facilitators. So here's a list of the licenses that have been issued, and according to the state site last week, these are the only licenses issued to date because they aren't issuing any business licenses yet. That comes at the end of December for January 1 implementation. So because it says Portland on here, Oregon is the only other state that has regulated or authorized natural medicines. So it's somewhat unsurprising that there are 4 Portland, Oregon businesses that are licensed as a facilitator training program within the state. As you recall, we have already issued land use regulations as to where these uses are permitted. So we have natural medicine healing centers are permitted in the widest number of zones within the city, and then the more industrial uses, the cultivation facility, products manufacture and testing facility are allowed within our industrial zones pursuant to the Title 16 changes that you made recently. And a little bit more background on the state statute regarding healing centers. So I've done quite a bit of research on what other cities are doing. A lot of it is still up in the air. We're hearing a lot about we're still discussing this or we're proposing this, but most seem to be considering the healing centers to be treated similarly to doctors' offices. So I thought you may be most interested in what these healing centers are. The healing center license may only be issued if they employ or contract with a facilitator, and the facilitator must provide the natural medicine services. And of course, the facilitator must be trained by the licensed facilitator training program. In addition, the facilitator is required to participate or to verify that the participant is at least 21. The law in several places say you have to be at least 21 to use any natural medicine, be around the growing of natural medicine, or to receive any services. And the natural medicine healing center licensee cannot distribute to a patient more than the maximum dosage that's allowed by law. So there are state statute prohibitions regarding the use of natural medicines. Nobody can give natural medicines to anyone under the age of 21. Possession of natural medicine under the age of 21 does continue to be a crime. It's also a crime to openly and publicly display or consume natural medicine. And Councilmember Prang had a question last time about the cultivation of natural medicine, which presumably is mushrooms. So anyone at their home can have a garden plot where they cultivate natural medicine, but it can't exceed 12 feet by 12 feet. Although the city can make this a larger size plot, should it be so inclined. I've not heard of any local government considering that. But it doesn't refer to the number of plants that can be grown on that plot, just that your garden can't exceed 12 feet by 12 feet. Your garden also has to be, I'm calling it a garden, I guess. Your cultivating spot must be in an enclosed and locked space. So it would have to be secured, and the law does refer to both inside and outside secured locations. People under the age of 21 cannot access it. And it's also a crime to manufacture a natural medicine product using an inherently hazardous substance, except if you're licensed. So what's not unlawful now? It is not unlawful for personal use to consume and to share your natural medicine as long as you're not getting paid for it. So nobody can sell natural medicine. That continues to be prohibited. It is also fine for a person to test personal use natural medicine for another person as long as they're 21 years of age or older. So if you want to make sure it is safe for your own personal use or supposed to give to your friends for their own personal use, you can have somebody test it. Now, I should let you know exactly what that means is somewhat outside of the scope of my expertise. I don't know exactly what they do to test it and make sure it's safe or what the level is. That's not clearly laid out yet. And then it's also very clear what the city cannot do. The city shall not adopt, enact, or enforce any ordinance imposing any greater criminal or civil penalty that's in statute. The statute does lay out what's somewhat small penalties for violations, such as a $100 fine for some of the violations. And the city shall not adopt any ordinance that otherwise conflicts with the licensing regulations. So question number one, and this surprised me after talking to quite a few other city attorneys, is some cities are choosing not to regulate at all and just relying on the state regulations. So if Englewood decided not to independently regulate this, what would that mean? That means that there's still a 1,000-foot buffer from any natural medicine usage, or natural medicine business rather, or healing center from a childcare center, preschool, elementary, middle, junior, or high school, or residential childcare facility. So that 1,000-foot buffer is already input into state law. It also has to comply with our zones that we already adopted. State law requires businesses to provide security and prevent access, an alarm system, video surveillance. The regulations regarding security for these businesses are quite extensive. All businesses are also required to secure and properly dispose of their waste, and it's very clear all over the place, no one under the age of 21 can use these, be administered these, or have access to them. So here's the map if the city doesn't do anything to regulate the use. So this includes the zoning that you already adopted. The red, slivers of red through the map are where healing centers can be, where it can be administered in a medical office-like setting. And the purple is where healing centers could be as well. There are industrial districts, but also where the manufacturing and cultivation facilities can be located. So this is if the city does nothing. But the city can expand those distance buffers. During the last presentation, council asked, can we expand it to 1,500 feet from certain locations? And we most certainly can, as long as it does not prohibit the businesses. There still has to be some locations where it is, I would say, viable locations where they can operate within the city of Englewood. So we could add additional buffer locations such as residential and or marijuana businesses as well. So this is the map if we added marijuana and residential, but kept the 1,000-foot buffer. As you can see, the specific red areas are almost completely gone. There's one little sliver. And then the purple areas where the healing centers could be, as well as any of the cultivation, manufacturing, is in the purple, also getting smaller. Well, then we have another option. If we added a 1,500-foot buffer and added residential uses, that eliminates all of the prior red areas, and the purple areas are a bit smaller. And then option, let's designate option 3, but slide 4 map would be if we did a 1,500-foot buffer, including marijuana and residential. As you can see, the purple is quite small, and there could be some question as to whether this provides viable opportunity for these businesses to operate, but it's certainly defensible. And throughout this presentation, I have sprinkled in the questions that council had last time. So we had a question on, could the city have a tax on natural medicines, just like we do on retail marijuana? None of the state laws or Prop 122 refer to a city tax. So we went straight to DORA. DORA has put out quite a few webinars that we could attend and we could ask questions. And so staff at DORA indicated that because there are no sales or retail sales, the city could not impose a sales tax. In fact, sales continue to be prohibited. For example, for personal use, you can grow it and you can give it away, but you can't sell it. It's because it is administered solely in a healing center as part of a medical procedure. So according to DORA, it is not viable for taxation. And here are some other provisions that other local governments have looked at. I think because of the issues that were raised by Councilmember Wright regarding if we have hours that end right at 5 o'clock, couldn't someone still be under the influence and have to be pushed out the door? And that is a concern that several other cities had. So we're seeing quite a few that are choosing not to set hours on healing centers because it is a medical atmosphere. The facilitators go through some pretty extensive training on how to administer it, and how to supervise it. So Arapahoe County proposed no set hours along with Boulder and Greenwood Village. Frederick did 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which was the only one I saw that had those hours. I spoke with the city attorney's office in Pueblo. They were considering longer hours for the very reasons you raised, Councilmember Wright. so that the facilitator can decide when a patient is no longer under the influence and can be released back out into the public. Parker does have the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you'll recall, Parker was the very first city to adopt any regulations. And Castle Rock had proposed 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., but I heard from an unofficial source that they were considering an expansion of that. I thought you would be interested, given we specifically discussed driving under the influence of natural medicines. Oregon law requires an agreement that they can't drive for 24 hours after. And then I was curious, well, how long is someone under the influence? Just a general internet search, I saw several sources said someone could be under the influence for 3 to 6 hours. However, the Boulder City Attorney's Office in their presentation suggested it could be quite a bit longer. But I don't have any personal knowledge, so I can't speak to that. So potential city regulations. First, we could do nothing. In that case, would rely solely on the state regulations, which has the 1,000-foot buffer, no hours, but it does have the extensive security regulations and licensing. Second, if we did want to pursue regulations, we will bring that to you at the next council meeting, and we could increase the buffer from 1,000 feet. We can go, I think I would be very comfortable with up to 1,500 feet. We could consider adding marijuana businesses and residential uses. We could restrict hours and days of operation. That's clearly within our time, place, and manner regulation authority. We could consider regulations that limit the public view into businesses, require clearly illuminated facilities with downward-facing security lighting. We could also specifically prohibit odors leaving the premises. And we also could consider duplicating some of the state regulations to allow for city enforcement and prosecution in municipal court. Otherwise, it would be left to the state. We did discuss today in a community development meeting as to what happens when people start calling to say, I think my neighbor's plot is 13 feet by 13 feet, not 12 feet by 12 feet. And my suggestion would be, unless we regulate that, I mean, that is a state law, and so perhaps then the sheriff would be the appropriate person to come and investigate that violation of state law. But so those, we are already anticipating some citizen concerns and the best way to respond to those as they inevitably arise. It's new for us, it's new for them.
City Attorney, thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions from council? So I guess I'll start off with a question. So I'm trying to understand the healing centers because, well, I'm taking a step back to just really understand. So this is a form of therapy, correct? In terms of, because I'm trying to understand what this is, but it sounds like it does help treat depression, addiction. So to me, it does sound like a type of therapy that is occurring within the healing centers. Is that right?
Yes, that's what I did some research into the Oregon Healing Centers, which there actually aren't very many of them. Apparently, they regularly treat PTSD as well, and it is a multi-hour process that starts with a physical and mental evaluation, and to confirm that the patient is an appropriate candidate for this type of therapy. It is then administered and supervised the entire time. And as to how it actually works, though, that exceeds the scope of my expertise.
Yeah, I'm just trying to visualize what these healing centers are. So it would be someone would go into a healing center, it would get administered there. They're not taking home any mushrooms with them or any of these substances with them. It's being administered within the healing center.
Yes, and they take none of them with them. It has to be ingested on site and overseen the entire time by the trained facilitator. So yes, I do envision that it is like a medical clinic, somewhat calm, quiet atmosphere.
Right.
And so that they can receive this treatment over multiple hours.
Yeah, because when this first came in front of us, I was picturing someone walking in and potentially leaving the premises still under the influence. And so that's the visual that I have, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. It seems to be a type of therapy that is being supervised and administered internally as part of this healing center. So it's not like how our marijuana shops are, where you can buy something, leave, and have that type of issue.
Yeah, it's very different from retail marijuana that
Okay.
you can go in, buy, and take it with you.
Right.
That's not the case.
Okay.
Now, you can have it on you if you grow it yourself.
And that's the issue that I have more with it, but obviously we can't really do anything about that because that was passed by the voters. So yeah, the cultivation and that aspect of it, I have bigger concerns about that than the actual healing center, based on what I'm hearing, but okay. That's good clarification. Thank you very much, City Attorney. Member, I'm not sure who was first. I'll go member Wright and then member Pring.
Thank you. I have lots of questions. I did a deep dive into this, and I actually spoke to a few people that have been attending the meetings, and I don't know if they're experts or not, but they have followed Oregon and then followed this. So I have questions for I just lost my words. The medical treatment, and then the labs, and then the growing at home. So the first I would like to jump into is the medical part. Some of the concerns is this person has attended the Department of Revenue meetings, and there's concern that they have there because they are regulating also, and they have not absolutely defined that they cannot take the product home, and that's one of the issues. There was a meeting last week, and she was sending me actual video recording of what they were saying, that they're not regulating any of this yet, and then some of the DORA. So from what we can do, can we in our ordinance say none of the product can be taken out of the healing centers in the ordinance that we put together, where it says that no product can be taken out of the healing center at all?
Yes, my reading of, I read all the regulations, all of the statutes, and of course the Prop 122, and I concluded that it had to be the facilitator through the facilitator licensing requires them to administer it all on site, and specifically they cannot administer an amount that exceeds more than the amount allowed by the state in a single administrative session.
Well, one of the concerns is SB 290 kind of overrides some of what, and forgive me, I'm just learning a lot of this. SB 29290 overrides some of what the voters voted on.
No, that can't happen. What the voters voted on, that's what the law is. So the Senate Bill 23-290 implemented what the voters said, but it cannot conflict with it. So just like we can't adopt a law that conflicts, it's because what the voters say, that is the law of the land, and we all have to comply with that.
Okay, so if the voters said that people could grow at home, but they didn't say an area, SB 23290 could say, then say the area that they could grow on.
So that would be implementing that direction. It can't conflict.
Okay.
But it could implement, just like the regulations we are doing. For example, no times are within Proposition 122 for when healing centers can be open. That's why we can regulate it. Now, if
Okay.
it said healing centers can only be open at 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., then that's what we would have to do.
Okay, so then in part of that 12 by 12, since it was done by the assembly, could we, as a home rule, reduce that? Or can we add to it and say no stacking? So you could do 12 by 12, but you can't stack up, or limit the amount of weight you're allowed to have for personal consumption.
Yes, with a couple of caveats. So the state adopted a law that specifically said we can't conflict with the laws that they pass. So we are given a specific set of parameters that we could regulate. So specifically, we could make the 12 by 12 foot bigger, but we can't make it smaller. And that's specifically within the statute. So we could make it 15 by 15 is allowed, but we couldn't say, no, by state law it's 12 by 12, but in Englewood it's only 10 by 10. That would not be allowed.
But can we say, okay, 12 by 12, but you're not allowed to stack?
What do you mean by stack?
So what if they have a 12 by 12 room and they add shelving, so they add shelves, so they're stacking mushrooms upon mushrooms upon mushrooms in that area?
So the law specifically refers to indoor and outdoor cultivation, but according to the law, it can't be more than 12 feet by 12 feet square foot total cultivation area. So if that's a lawn, that's 12 feet by 12 feet. But if it's inside, that would be, what is that, 244 square feet total. So they could have shelves, but they couldn't have more than 244 square feet.
Okay, I just think people will find a way to work around it. So, okay.
I think you're probably right. I mean, the laws are so new that nobody knows what the loopholes are yet.
Right, and that's why I'm thinking if the state came up with it, we could use home rule to confine. Okay, here's my next question. Like I said, I have questions. Can we require for people that are growing at home to have a permit or register that they are growing at home so we could keep an eye on what's going on?
That is a really good and interesting question. I haven't seen any reference to regulation of home grow because this is actually inserted into the criminal code. That because the criminal codes previously said psychedelic mushrooms are prohibited, now it says they're not. You can in fact grow them. It's not a criminal violation if you grow them yourselves on no more than a 12 by 12 foot plot. Possibly, because licensing is only for these businesses,
Right,
for the healing centers, the cultivation centers. There's nothing that refers to state licensing of anyone that's growing this on their own property. So I will have to research it, but in general, if there's nothing that prohibits it, the answer is yes, we can do it.
Okay, because here's my concern, and I will express it to everybody. As soon as they made marijuana legal, we know of somebody that started a grow operation. They were going to be millionaires. As soon as Prop 122 went through, they shut down their marijuana operation and started growing mushrooms. So they don't sell it to people, but they take a donation from people. And this is my big concern. So if there's you can minimize whatever we could do, because we've already seen where 2 children got a hold of it, gave a tip or donation, and they ended up in the hospital. And I don't know if you've looked at the different types coming down the pike of mushrooms that are going to become legal, but one of them is mescaline or something like that, and it's equivalent to like an LSD. And this stuff could be, you mix some, it could become dangerous. So the time of day, I was being creative. It says right in some documentation that it could last up to 15 hours. This was provided on the Oregon stuff. And it's going to be for people, the healing centers, that if you don't have insurance, it will cost $3,000 to $4,000. So this is going to be for the affluent type of people. And I was thinking time of day, can we be creative? And these healing centers could be open from 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. And they require a safety plan and a driver. I guess I should let someone else talk and just come back to me, because I have a lot of
Okay.
suggestions on this. So, and then when it comes to the labs or cultivations, also I had some thoughts. So, just trying to be creative here. So, thank you.
Member Prang?
Thank you for the presentation. I do have a handful of questions myself. One, a quick and easy one, just so that I understand. When it's talking about transporting on our roads and that not being an offense, it references a person who's licensed to exercise such privileges. Is that a natural medicine handler license? Or who is it that's allowed to transport on our roads?
It wouldn't be a healing center. If I were to guess, it would be cultivation or product manufacturer, because they're the ones that grow it, then they take it from grow to a processor. And then then the processor would need to transport it to the healing center.
Okay.
And then the healing center has to administer it on site. So it's not actually an easy question. But I would suspect those would be the two that would be included in their license.
Okay.
Because they have to transport it as part of the business to the next step.
Okay, that's helpful. So that did kind of bleed into another area that was in my thinking. So the states, we have to allow businesses to be able to cultivate it within our city. But the state's gonna regulate how it's grown, the state's gonna regulate if it's tested or not, and it's only those state licensed growers or cultivators from which the healing centers can purchase, or however their arrangement is arranged, to access the medicine that they're administering in the.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the state regulations are very detailed in maintaining records regarding the product and how much that you've distributed to each person, how much you cultivated. So the regulations are extensive on that.
Okay. Also, can we, under manner, similar to, I think Member Wright just brought it up, but can we require that so if I go for a colonoscopy, for a medical procedure, I'm required to have a driver drive me home because of the nature of that procedure itself, and I'm under the influence of an anesthesia or whatever. Are we allowed under manner to require, or could we require the healing centers have someone come back to transport the person home? Like, I'm not necessarily wanting to get too much into like how long it's gonna last, but if we could do anything around our streets being safer by someone being driven home, I think that could address some of that. Like, your metabolism is really fast, but mine's slow, and maybe it's gonna take 12 hours for one person to finish their experience versus 3 for another.
So the same laws that require you to get a driver after surgery apply to this treatment as well. So you are prohibited from operating a motor vehicle while under the influence of drugs or alcohol to the degree that you're incapable of safely operating a motor vehicle. And so that would apply to natural medicines. If you are under the influence of a natural medicine to the degree that you can't safely operate a motor vehicle, we already have a law in the books that prohibits that. In addition, medical providers, there's no law that says you can't, other than the DUI law, that says you can't have a surgery and drive home, but your medical provider requires it because it would fall under their insurance if they didn't require it. I mean, you would have a malpractice claim against them if you or somebody else got hurt because they let you out and drive a car. So for the same reason, the Natural Medicine Healing Center would be liable should they let you do something that's unsafe. So I don't think we necessarily need a separate law on that because we already have laws on the books that apply to medicine and medical procedures in every other context. So I don't know that we need a specific one here, but we certainly could add so we can't impact their license. So I was going to say we could, though, adopt a law that a user of natural medicines can't operate a motor vehicle when they're under the influence, but we already have that law. That's the DUI law.
How would the police test for that?
So it's called a DRE, which is a drug recognition expert. It's not like alcohol that you can blow into a breath test. So a DRE is a specialized, highly trained police officer that shows up to the scene and does a battery of tests to determine if you're under the influence, what category of drugs you're under the influence to, and they tie your unsafe driving to the fact that you are under the influence.
Okay.
So it's not a black and white 0.08 blood alcohol level, but it's a specialist that they're allowed to testify as to what they see based on your reactions and how you are driving to tie it to what you're under the influence of. And in some cases, they can get a blood test to prove that you are under the influence. I've never been a prosecutor for DUI in the state of Colorado, so I'm assuming it's a bit different, but the DRE program is a nationwide program.
Okay. And then, so, I guess if a healing center holds most of the liability because they're implementing this therapy and they're licensed to do it in a certain way, I'm assuming there's got to be some sort of requirement, or I just want to make sure that in their paperwork, there's something that says somewhere, or if it's not in their paperwork, then we should require it somewhere, that has some kind of statement around the person opting to participate in this kind of therapy at their own risk. And I'm just thinking, again, everybody's different, everybody's body's different, everybody's mind's different, especially if this kind of natural medicine that's initially going to be available, could be treating someone with PTSD, and there's a mental health concern there. So I just want to make sure that the city has a way to not be liable in any way, like if someone has a bad experience or some sort of resulting medical condition from their experience at one of these centers.
I 100% agree that that is a necessary and appropriate regulation. However, I don't think that's within the scope of what we can regulate. That was regulated within the licensing of the state. We can only regulate time, place, and manner of when and where they do business, and not actually how they do business inside, because
Okay.
that's strictly the purview of the state. However, I do think those are very good ideas, and the state no doubt will be continuing to evolve the regulations for the licenses, and I think that would be something the state could certainly consider, especially if it becomes an issue in our communities. Then that's something that we could certainly advocate for.
Okay, that's helpful clarification on us not being able to really regulate that piece of it. And then I guess lastly, I don't have as much concern around odor related to this. I don't think that odor is an issue. I'm not sure about the cultivation piece, but I think the product itself. I would be more concerned in, would it be allowable under the manner piece that we can regulate or have any control or say over, to have soundproofing in the facilities, in the healing centers themselves? Again, going back to, like, if someone's having a bad experience during this journey that they're on, and we do have, buffers with distance and all of that, but, if we have families walking by, or if it's near, I also think that facilities that serve the disabled should be included in buffer areas. But, I just want to be sensitive to, if we do have these healing centers in our communities and neighbors are out walking around, after work with their kids and, enjoying their evening, that there's some sort of way that we can make sure that noise from the centers wouldn't become an issue in our communities.
Yes, I think we can. I mean, anything that impacts the outside of the building, we certainly can. And the minute any patient leaves the facility, we can regulate it then as well. I mean, that's why our DUI laws would apply to someone operating a motor vehicle. I think we could certainly include a requirement that sounds of treatment, something like that, that it can't be heard from the street. We do already have unreasonable noise ordinances that would prohibit a certain level of noise. And I haven't read anything about these being noisy treatments, so I would be hesitant to require them all to have a certain level of soundproofing if that ended up not being the case. Would it meet your needs to say something like,
I mean, something where like if we were to receive complaints and that does become an issue, I'm just thinking if these businesses are coming in, it's kind of a question mark and an unknown for us. Whatever we can do to kind of protect the area and allow for these businesses to be here and do what they need to do and do their good work, but also just be thoughtful of all of those little pieces that we can't have any control over ahead of the game. So maybe it is a situation where if we receive complaints about noise that we're then able to require some sort of soundproofing.
so we do already have a section on the books about disturbance of the peace. Nobody can disturb the peace of a neighborhood by loud or unusual noises. We also do have a specific noise ordinance that would prohibit a certain decibel of noise. So I think if there is disturbing noises, we could have the option, the police could make contact and discuss whether they're disturbing the peace, whether they need to keep it down. It could even potentially be where the facilitator could be in municipal court for causing such a disturbance of the peace. So we do already have something that could address that, but we could definitely be more specific.
Okay, thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. So in option number 3, where the map, where it says natural medicines, 1,500 marijuana and residential, is that the smallest area? So my question is, because there's only purple there and no red, can the healing centers be allowed in the purple area also?
Yes, so purple is all natural medicines, so it would include healing centers. When you saw red on an earlier map, you have to go back 2, red would be where healing centers are allowed, but no other natural medicine uses. Because healing centers are treated a little bit differently because they're anticipated to be a doctor's office. Whereas the other natural medicine uses are only allowed in industrial areas. So that's why red includes purple. No, wait, purple includes red, but red does not include purple. So when you see this one that only shows purple, everything is allowed in the purple, including healing centers.
So I would be in favor of that because that's going to not eliminate it totally, but I actually think being in the industrial areas, it might be less disturbing than other areas. One other question that I have is, will facilitators be held responsible if the patient is released while still under the influence?
So yes and no, in that they have insurance coverage as a medical provider. And so just like if your primary care physician administers medicine and then inappropriately lets you leave when you're not safe to leave, they would have liability. So would a facilitator in that instance. In addition, if they don't follow the requirements of their facilitator license, they could lose their license, and that is a state action. So they have to follow all of the state guidelines for administering and overseeing it. It can't, for example, administer more than the maximum allowed, that sort of thing. So they do have liability, and they could potentially face civil liability as well. For example, if they do something improper and let someone out on the street that causes a car accident, the person harmed potentially could have a civil action against the facilitator as well.
Okay, but that wouldn't, I mean, it might involve our police department, correct, if there was an accident or something?
More than likely, yes.
Okay, and I mean, so some of the issues that we're going to have, we're mostly talking about the healing centers right now, but some of our potential problems could be could come from people that are using it at home.
Yes, and in fact, that's where I personally am more concerned about usage because they're not being regulated. There's not a medically trained professional that's giving it to them, deciding how much is enough or how much is too much. They're just doing it on their own. Nobody's watching it. I suspect more than likely it's untested. The dosage and strength are unregulated. So that's where I personally am more concerned about somebody causing an accident, not when they're in a medical setting and someone is treating them for, they've paid thousands of dollars for somebody to help them with PTSD. So that to me poses the greater risk. And that's where there's no time, place, and manner restrictions for the most part.
So we can do nothing about that, or is there things that we can regulate there?
Well, Councilmember Wright asked, can we require a license for people that are growing at home? So I will research it. If it's not prohibited, then we can. But I've seen nothing on any city attempting to do that or any suggestion regarding it. So I think that's a good suggestion, and I will research that first thing tomorrow morning. But it's, again, the state says they have the right to cultivate in a 12 by 12 plot, and we can't reduce that. The state says they have the right to consume it personally. So that's when the other laws on the books about DUI, for example, are meant to protect the public.
Okay, then I have one final question, and this is, I'm not talking about the legitimacy of this and the need for this, but my question is, if we cannot break state law, can the state break federal law and/or require the municipality to break federal laws?
Can you be a bit more specific about what federal law you're referring to? Are you talking about federal drug laws?
I think this, controlled substances, and I mean this specifically. It is still, this specifically is still illegal at the federal level.
Yes, and so much like marijuana, for CDL drivers, the Commercial Driver's License Program is administered by the federal government, which is why even though it's legal in Colorado, it's still illegal under federal law, so you still can't if you have a CDL, for example. So that would apply to natural medicines as well. But in this case, we have a vote of the people of the state of Colorado, which means that has overridden the otherwise applicable federal statute that would apply to this. It's decriminalized in the state, but it's not decriminalized federally.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. If a group of citizens came here with a ballot initiative that violated state law, federal law, and they wanted to pass it in Englewood, I mean, because I know anytime there's a ballot initiative, it has to go before your office. Would you allow anything to be put on the ballot that violates federal law or state or municipal law?
It would depend on what the question is, how it's specifically written, and if it otherwise complies with the requirements of our petitioning procedures and initiative procedures. So I hate to speak in hypotheticals, but just because they adopt a law doesn't mean it's enforceable, so likely we would allow it on the ballot, depending on the language and exactly what it says. But we can't adopt a law, and the state of Colorado couldn't adopt a law that violated the US Constitution because that's the law of the land. So even if we did, that would still be, it wouldn't be enforceable.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, really, but it annoys me that the state is telling us what we can do, and I think controlled substances, there are things the federal government can do, and I think those could be coming down, and that is cutting off all federal money from states. And so, anyway, that's neither here nor there.
It's often the pocketbook that effectuates social change.
Right. Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Member Wright, do you have additional questions, or do we want to start talking time, place, and manner? Okay, let's go questions, and then before you get to time, place, and manner, we'll go to member wards. So go ahead with your questions.
Okay, I have a couple more, please. For personal use, can we limit the amount a person or a household has? So we have to have that 12 by 12, could we say a person is limited to X amount dry or wet, whatever I don't know. Like you, I just dived into this, so started asking questions. I guess they dry it out and tea or eat or whatever, and I guess one part of it is more potent than another, and I've learned more about mushrooms than I ever wanted to know. So could we say a person or a household, because it's grown in a 12 by 12 area, is only allowed to have X amount of mushrooms, because one person only needs so much. If there's any more than that, I would say they're probably doing more than personal consumption.
Well, they can give it away too, to their friends. Then they just
You
can't sell it.
Then you probably have an awful lot of friends. So even if you took that into consideration, and what I saw, this stuff grows almost faster than weeds. So is that something that we could look at, or a possibility to say, hey, you're only allowed? And the other, well, I know what you're gonna say, but I'll ask also, is it has to be, even if it's for personal consumption, it cannot be in the front of your car, it has to be in your trunk or something like that. I want to make life difficult for people that are considering growing this for, even, like you said, the bigger issue is going to be personal consumption. So I'm thinking outside the box as much as I can. And then, of course, it must be locked up and not available for anyone under the age of 21, and animals, and anybody that could be harmed that is not of age.
It is required to be secured, even for personal cultivation, and not accessible by anyone under the age of 21. The law specifically refers to if there's cultivation inside, it has to be in a locked room, not accessible to those underage.
Does it also mention animals?
It does not mention animals. It only mentions juveniles.
I think we need to think about our pets too, so. The other thing is for the cultivation sites, about security, and even the dosing centers, or whatever they're called. And we talked about this previously, lighting and security. I think that's very important. So I think that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Member Wright. Member Ward?
I just wanted to speak a little bit to some of Member Russell's concerns and some of Member Wright's concerns in the initiative process in general, which happens to be in my area of expertise. This ballot initiative was passed as a statutory initiative. That's why it's titled proposition and not amendment, which means that the legislature is entitled to make changes to it if they choose to do so. They can override the vote of the people because it was passed as a statutory initiative. It's something that they have commonly done in the last 5 years on tax policy in particular, which is why you see a swath of constitutional ballot issues coming forward, despite the fact that they take a 55% vote of the people to pass. The questions that Member Russell asked about whether or not somebody can initiate something that is inherently unconstitutional, the answer to that is yes, based on case law. The question of whether it's constitutional or not doesn't actually get answered until after it passes. But the legislative body doesn't have the right to preempt the passage of something just because it's unconstitutional. The precedent there is a case called McKee versus City of Louisville, 616 Pacific 2nd, 969 from 1980. the merits of an initiative or the constitutionality of it upon adoption don't weigh in until after it passes. Nothing can preempt it from going on because the right to initiate is constitutionally protected in the state of Colorado. That being said, some of the questions about distancing I think are relevant here in that the questions we're asking there's not really a strong precedent to follow here. I think personally, the 1,500 from marijuana and residential is a little bit aggressive for my taste, and I would choose the prior one, which was the, what is that?
Number 4.
Yeah, it's the second to last map. 3, yeah, natural medicine, 1,500, and residential. But I could be convinced either way, frankly. It is a little bit disturbing to me, I confess, that one of the 2 areas where these can be located is in District 4. That zone, if I recall my District 4 map correctly, is a pretty highly industrial area near the Waste Management Transfer Center. So not a ton of appeal there to begin with, although we do have some residential areas not too far from there. I think that's pretty much everything I have to contribute on this at the current time. I'm skeptical about the future of this in Colorado, just in general, and a little concerned, frankly, about the negative effect that it may have in Englewood, despite the good intentions that were here. I'm not particularly fond of the idea of people who are under the influence of these types of drugs driving around on our roads. But I'm not particularly fond of the idea of people who are under the influence of any types of drugs driving on our roads. So I think that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Noonan-Camp.
I'm happy to weigh in with my perspective. I actually, by happenstance, ended up sitting next to someone at an event on Saturday who runs one of these facilities in Boulder, and it was very illuminating and educational and informative. I would probably align more with Member Ward in the sense of kind of maybe somewhere in the middle. I don't have, maybe, my concern is not as acute as some of my colleagues. This is, the people passed it. If we wanted, there's a lot of conversation on this council about honoring the will of the people. This is an opportunity to do that. And obviously we want to do it in a safe way. So I think the map we're looking at right now seems appropriate to me. My biggest desire in this is that we are not creating duplicative statutes and just clogging our code full of things that we already have it in the nuisance law, we already have it in sound or other areas of our code. I think sometimes we can get excited to legislate about something where we actually already have a code that will do the job just as well. And I want us to be mindful about where is the state going to regulate what the state does and what can we actually control in time, manner, and place and focus our efforts there. So I would like to see a focused statute coming out of this or ordinance and align with this map. That's where I stand.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Member Wright, did you want to go through your list of time, place, and manner, and then we could discuss it as a council? It sounds like you have a list, so
Sure.
go ahead.
I myself like the option 3, please. I've had a lot of calls about this from people. They're not too excited about it. That's why I started looking into it. So Colorado may have voted for it, but like I said, I've had a lot of calls, more calls than anything else about this. So I believe the residents of Englewood are not too thrilled about this. The time, like I said, I was looking for outside of the box type of time. And I was thinking, what about 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. type of thing? I know I don't think we're going to have, and I was thinking back to what the city attorney was saying, that she doesn't think that there's going to be a huge desire for healing centers to be in Englewood. I don't know where you got that from, but it keeps ringing to me. It may be more of the cultivation that may be interesting. I don't know. But I just have concerns of, I have my own personal story with things that have happened with people that that I will not get into, but I'm concerned about, I think 4 p.m. to 4 a.m., it's not during a time where there is high traffic. People go to the dosing centers, and then at 4 a.m., if somebody chooses to drive themselves, there's not a lot of traffic. And if this is something important with a family member or someone else or Uber, they could drive themselves. I believe that we need to have a safety plan, be it a driver or if something goes wrong. I don't know if it's been written up with the assembly, but I think that needs to be taken. I think there's lighting and security and, prevent break-ins. City attorney mentioned something about insurance. I think there needs to be ample coverage on everybody. Then, like I had mentioned for the home growers, making sure that there is, and she said it, lock up, if we could look into permitting. And City Attorney Niles, could we require everybody to register or have a permit even if we don't charge in Englewood? Just so we know who's doing what?
For which action?
Any of them.
So we can't for any that the state already licenses?
Even if we don't charge?
No. So
Or a registration maybe?
no, licensing of this is solely within the state's purview. However, who has a license is freely available on the state's website. So we can find it there.
Okay.
Where we possibly could is for the personal cultivation
Personal.
piece, because it's not otherwise regulated by the state. It's just no longer a criminal action. And so that's where, if I were to guess, I would guess that we can require a license for personal cultivation, but I want to confirm that with research.
Okay.
Which, like I said, I'll do that first thing in the morning, though.
Okay. And then I believe it was covered with the cultivation, having some type of 24-hour security, being video cameras, lighting. Also with the healing centers, I think that's important. And I believe we discussed at our first study session, having the ability where nobody could look into any of those sites. I think that that's really important, that they cannot see in. I believe that's my long list.
Okay. Thank you, Member Wright.
Thank you.
So I think, and I thought I heard you say this, City Attorney Niles, but the driver, the lighting and security, that's already part of the and the insurance. That's already a requirement of these. It's the two regulate and not regulate.
Yes. So let me back up.
So those are already being taken care of from the state level, correct?
Yes. This is what's required at the state level. I don't believe there was anything about exterior lighting at the state level. That was something we had discussed in the first presentation that I gave.
Oh, that is missing.
And that was something on the last slide that we could consider exterior lighting of these facilities. As far as insurance requirements, I don't think that falls within time, place, and manner of what we can regulate. That falls under the state licensing
Okay.
for the licensed businesses.
And then real quick, Member Wright, you said option 3, so is that the 1,500 marijuana and residential,
Yes, ma'am.
that one? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right, perfect. So then we have the time. I agree with you on the home growers. If there's a way that we can require licensing or some sort of registration program, I'd be up for that. And then you mentioned not able to see in as well as the exterior light. So, okay, perfect. Let me just weigh in on where I'm at. I'm also kind of in the camp. I'd be fine with the 1,500. I'm not as concerned. I think the more of the concern I happen to have is on the cultivation side. That to me seems to be where there isn't as much regulation or at least supervision. So that's where I foresee additional issues for the city. I'm not as concerned with the healing centers or with the natural medicines. But again, I just don't know. But where I see more of the risk is just going to be on the cultivation. So I'll be okay with the other map, which was, I think, just 1,500 in residential. So that would be my preference on that. Member Pring, I don't think you weighed in on which preference on the map you had.
I think I'd be okay with the 1,500 plus residential as well.
All right. And then does anybody want to weigh in terms of the time? Home growers, not able to see in, exterior lighting? Those seem to be the four that I still have from Member Wright from your list. So go ahead, Member Pring.
I agree with the concerns residing more around cultivation, and I feel like the state in their licensing and regulating the manufacturers that are going to provide it to the healing centers are less of a concern. But I would like some exploration of us knowing where people are cultivating within the city. I think that that would be useful information to our police department. And how are we to know whether someone's complying with the state law or not, with the 12 by 12 or whatever, if we don't know who's cultivating and who's not? So I'd be willing to explore that and any security type stuff around the healing center areas. I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Member Pring. Actually, I'll jump in on one other thing. They're not able to see in. I'm just foreseeing what a doctor's office looks like, so I'm expecting like a waiting area. And so I'd be less concerned about seeing in or not being able to see in if it is a waiting area versus where they actually administer it. So I guess to your concern, that's if they're not actually administering right outside or right on the other side of the windows, then I won't have as much concern about frosting the windows. So that's kind of where I stand on that aspect of it, but just so you know, Member Wright. Member Noonekamp?
Sure, I'm happy to weigh in. I like what Parker and Castle Rock did, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's like standard business hours that I think you would see from a doctor's office. So if we want this to appear like a doctor's office or medical office within the community and not like something that's more nefarious, and I think, regulating it similarly, to your point also about the appearance of the building, is something that I would support. And then, yes, absolutely, I think we should look into the registration of the home growers, but everything that I've heard tonight is that we basically have no ability to regulate them. So I think the registration is a very interesting process. I agree with all of the concerns, and also I don't want us to spin our wheels on something where we have no ability to do anything. So I think investigating the areas where we could have ability to do something makes a ton of sense, but I feel like we keep having the same conversation hoping we're gonna get a different answer, and I don't think that there is a different answer for us to get. So that's where I stand.
All right, thank you, Member Noonekamp. And I'll just finish up. So I'll be fine with the hours, as you stated, Member Noonekamp. I'm not as concerned about the timing of it for the healing centers, so I'll be fine regulating similar to what Parker and Castle Rock did. And I'll be fine with the exterior lighting and additional safety measures that have been brought forth. So anyone else want to chime in? Anything else that we may have not touched on? Go ahead, Member Wright.
So if someone takes 15 hours or 12 hours, what are we going to put in the ordinance for that? That's where that safety plan comes into play.
City Attorney Niles, did you want to weigh in on that if they're under the influence longer than the hours of operation?
I would suggest that if we do hours, then we add however that the patient may stay with the facilitator or shall stay with the facilitator perhaps until they are no longer under the influence.
Yeah.
So that they can, much like how, a doctor's office may stay open late if your procedure runs long, kind of similarly, that they could stay longer if the facilitator in their judgment deems it's necessary until the patient is safe to go out in the world.
Right, and I think it needs to be that way, shall be that way, yes.
Okay. All right, anyone see different in terms of the hours, as was just stated by the city attorney Niles? 8 to 5, unless still under the influence, or however we want to word it. I guess still ask city attorney to look into the permitting. I understand Member Noonan-Camp's point on the individual, but it does sound like members of council at least want to see what potentially we could do for actual cultivators. And then exterior lighting seems like we did have, we had 3 at least that wanted to see additional exterior lighting. Those are the ones that I had that I've heard multiple members of council that wanted to look into further. So anything that I stated that was incorrect or anything to add? All right, I don't think so. Go ahead, City Attorney Niles.
So my question is, do you want me to bring this back to you in a proposed ordinance form for action? Or I could, we could discuss it again after I've completed this research, have a draft ordinance. We could discuss it again at the next meeting and then take action at the second meeting in December. The issue with that is that the licenses will start issuing at the beginning of January. Again, I've done a little bit of research, asked around. There's no indication that anyone is currently planning to seek a license in the city of Englewood. So that may give us some extra time. I don't know when cultivation will start, but so do you want to go ahead and consider an ordinance at the next meeting, or talk about it with a proposed ordinance in front of you at the next meeting, and then consider perhaps first reading at the second meeting in December?
From my perspective, I think I would rather bring it in front of us, because this is the third conversation. I'm not sure if there's a need for a fourth conversation, study session. I'd rather see the ordinance and have the discussion at that point. Member Noonan-Camp?
I agree with that direction, Mayor, but I would also just like to underscore that we will run up against the clock if we try to make amendments on first reading and then second reading, and then we don't have another week. So if we have amendments or changes to what the city attorney drafts, let's really try to get them on first reading, and also not waste her time candidly by doing a lot of things and then ultimately not being able to pass the ordinance. And so I think if we're going to commit to that, we just need to be prepared for any changes we would make on first reading.
Right, no, I understand that, Member Noonan-Camp. Good point. Anyone else?
Mayor,
Go ahead.
one thing that I could perhaps do to facilitate that is, as soon as I have a draft, I am happy to email it out to council so that you can read it ahead of time. And if there's anything that you would like to see changed, or have any questions about something, or would like for me to look into something before we discuss it Monday night, then I could do that research and be prepared to discuss it Monday night. I think that would be helpful from my perspective, and I know I would feel more prepared.
Yeah, if that would help, City Attorney, that would be fine with me. It looks like members of council as well, so. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With that, everyone, let's take a quick break. Do we need 10 minutes, or can we do 5? It's about 8:03 right now, so 10? All right, it looks like 10 minutes it is. So if we could be back a little bit after 8:10, we'll continue the meeting. Thank you. All right, everyone, we are now back. We are moving on to agenda item 6A. This is resolution authorizing the transfer of the ground lease on the former Weingarten property to New Englewood LLC. We have both Director of Community Development Brad Power and Chief Redevelopment Officer Dan Parumba. Dan, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, we're here to answer any questions council may have about the recommended motion approving a resolution authorizing the transfer of the ground lease on the former Weingarten property from entity of L&R Partners to a joint venture called New Englewood LLC, which is a joint venture of Ogilvy Properties and DPC companies, both longtime real estate players in the Denver market.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan. Any questions from members of council? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Yes, was this necessary for this to come before the council? This resolution?
There's a deemed approved provision in the lease, but it was felt that it would be beneficial for council to be consulted about the transfer and about the consent to the transfer. It was also felt that it would be a good opportunity to introduce the two transferees who are assuming the ground lease liability.
Thank you for that. And I just have one question for the city attorney. So what would happen if the council happened to vote this resolution down tonight? Would it go forward without us?
So by our contract, the city has to approve it unless it has good cause to deny the transfer. And I have not seen good cause that would support a denial. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but we've looked and haven't seen any yet. So if city council declines to approve it and there is not good cause, we would then be in breach of contract.
So that means it wouldn't go forward if city council did not approve it tonight. And then we would be considered in breach of contract.
It possibly would go forward, but only after we got sued to enforce that contractual provision.
Thank you.
Member Ward.
I'm going to dig a little deeper there, if you don't mind. I just want to clarify. First of all, I think Mr. Parumba described what's exactly happening here, but I'm a little concerned that there might be some public confusion about what exactly is occurring in this transaction. Can you explain the difference between transferring the ground lease and abandoning the ground lease so that we have clarity over the transaction that we're actually approving here now?
The transaction that's contemplated by the assignment has the two companies that I mentioned and their joint venture, that's DPC companies and Ogilvy Properties, stepping into all of the liabilities under the ground lease with the city. So the city has every legal right to continue to hold the new entities responsible for compliance with all provisions of the ground lease, which runs another 61 years, I believe, something like that. 51, sorry. So yeah, they're basically on the hook to perform all the provisions, all the obligations under the ground lease.
Mayor, would now be an appropriate time for me to make some comments about why we're doing this? Or?
Yeah, I think this would be a good time. I don't see any other questions. Go ahead.
So I asked for this resolution to go forward, despite the fact that it, under our contract, is possible for this to be an administrative action on the part of staff. And the reason why I asked for this resolution to go forward is because I want it to be clear to the public that we're aware of what's happening at City Center and that we are granting our explicit approval for what's occurring, in spite of the fact that we do have the option of disapproving and then engaging in whatever litigation might result as a result of our disapproval. But I am confident that this transaction doesn't do anything other than advance the city's interest at City Center, and it doesn't change the fact that we still own the ground underneath this ground lease. It just changes who controls, who has the authority to lease those properties for the next 51 years, which is why I asked for the resolution to go forward tonight.
Thank you, Member Ward. Yeah, I would second that as well. There's been a lot of conversations about City Center over the last few years, and I want to be very clear to the public that the redevelopment of City Center is not occurring with this vote. This is just the transfer of the ground lease. So that's why I'm in favor of having this resolution here tonight. So the members of the public are aware that a larger redevelopment is not occurring because of the vote tonight. So, Member Russell.
Thank you. Then can I ask another question? So is it possible that at some point down the road, if we sell the property, there would be another vote if we decide we're terminating the ground lease? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Any further questions from members of council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 7A, which is the resolution authorizing the transfer of the ground lease on the former Weingarten property to New Englewood LLC?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Ward. Could I get a second?
Second?
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Any further comments? Can we please vote?
Member Noonan-Camp?
Aye.
Member Prang?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Member Ward?
Aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Mayor Sierra?
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Dan and Brad, thank you very much for your time tonight. Happy Thanksgiving. All right, moving on to agenda item 8, reports from boards and commissions. Anything from our liaisons? Go ahead, Member Prang.
Thank you. We did have a Parks and Rec meeting on the 14th. Just wanted to loop back around to council on the issue that I made aware of some question marks around surveys and having a commissioner that requested a conversation around whether there should be some oversight. That was resolved in our last meeting. Essentially, there was just kind of a discussion by city staff on many of the surveys that Parks and Rec put out around projects are designed by our consultants with a specific design need in mind. But that being said, we did agree to have like an open comment area added to each survey that was put out to address the concern that commissioner brought forward. So that has been resolved. We had lots of good information about the bond and how it will proceed as far as like each project, and there being a lot of work to not only social media wise and to get word out to surrounding neighborhoods through door hangers and other actions to make sure that we're pulling people into those stakeholder meetings as each project progresses. There will be website pages that will update on each project. The Parks and Rec Commission will serve as the oversight committee for the bond in making sure that the city's on track and staying honest to what the bond was passed for. And then lastly, it was a really positive night because there were 6 members, residents from the community that came to give public comment that night, which is, I have yet to see in attendance at those meetings. And people just wanted to come out and thank the commission for the work that they did around helping to get the bond passed, and specifically mentioned a few of our residents, Rick Emmelhines and Jim Woodward, on the work that they both individually did. So it was nice to see people come out and give some positive support for the passage of that and the accountability that will result from it.
Thank you very much, Member Prang. Member Russell.
Thank you. The Code Enforcement Advisory Committee met last week. They've been going through the Muni Code in regarding things that they're responsible for. I think we did Title 12 or Chapter 12 last week. The other thing that was interesting, that they had done the bylaws the week before or the month before. And there was a question about, did we have a budget? Because there was something in the bylaws that we did. And so some research was done, and they used to have a $500 budget, but they've given them $250. So I don't know where that comes from, but ultimately, they're looking at things that will, can be used perhaps in the welcome, there's a welcome bag that neighborhood resources puts out, and maybe putting a magnet or something in there reminding people of their responsibilities and just how to contact code enforcement and things like that. So anyway, I think they're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Russell. Member Ward.
The Region 9 Opioid Abatement Task Force met a couple of weeks ago, and I think there is an opportunity. I mentioned this briefly at the Tri-Cities meeting, but I think there's an opportunity for the Tri-Cities area to tap into some funding potentially from the Region 9 Opioid Abatement Task Force. It has to be necessarily connected to the opioid crisis, which I believe personally that a sizable amount of the homeless issue is directly related to drug abuse. And as such, we would be able to direct some of that funding in that direction if we got the approval of the Region 9 committee. The committee has about $6 million remaining to be spent, or in the budget, I should say, for the next couple of years before the next tranche of settlement funds comes in. So there is some fund availability, but there's also a timeline for application. The county has erected an application portal, and I'm hoping that we will be able to find some people who are more gifted at justifying expenditures or looking for places to put the money than I am, to advocate for us to try to tap into some of that on behalf of Sheridan, Littleton, and Englewood.
Thank you very much, Member Ward. Just a quick update for me. So with the condensed schedule of the holidays and all that, I wasn't able to make the sustainability meeting occurred during the night of a council meeting, so wasn't able to attend. I'll go back and listen to that. Wasn't able to make the DDA meeting last week. My son had a basketball game that night, so I wasn't able to make it, but I did make Dr. Cog that night. The one thing that did come out of Dr. Cog, though, was, as you guys recall, we weren't able to get off the ground with the 285 Broadway Bridge. They made a decision that night to, we stated that we no longer needed the funding because we weren't going to move forward with that project. The funding was used by Littleton, or it's going to be used by Littleton and Centennial for two projects that they have in their community. One's up Arapahoe, the other ones I believe is Mineral and Santa Fe, I believe. But I guess the good news there is that they were very thankful to keep the money within the region and go towards projects that, for a couple of close partners of ours within Centennial and Littleton. So they were thankful for that. So that's the update there. I know that we're still looking to get additional funding from Dr. Cog for complete streets. So a decision may be made on that here early in 2025. So I'll keep you all posted on that piece as well. All right, anything else regarding council members' choice? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. I actually happened to listen to the mayor-manager meeting last week, and it was brought up about the time frame for ranked choice voting, and the mayor pro tem wanted the Boulder clerk to be invited. If we're inviting the Boulder clerk to do this, and in the first place, I don't think we should move forward with ranked choice voting, and I think perhaps we need to have council weigh in. It failed on the ballot this year, bipartisan. But if we are moving forward with ranked choice voting, I would like some of the cities in Colorado that had ranked choice voting, and then they did away with it. So I don't want just one side coming to present.
Thank you so much, Member Russell. And actually, Sarah, I may throw you on the spot because I believe the comment came from you that Boulder may be interested in coming to the meeting. I don't know if it was actually brought up by the mayor pro tem.
Yeah, I know Stephanie was in touch with the Boulder clerk. We saw her at a conference recently, and she presented on ranked choice voting, and she had agreed that she would be willing to come and answer questions. I'm not sure who else. I know she was trying to reach out to some others.
Okay, your point's taken though, Member Russell, because I think Telluride was one that had it, but then no longer do it. There were a couple other cities based on the presentation that we had that.
Telluride, Actually, Carbondale adopted it in 2002, but they have yet to implement it. But I do think there are some other cities that have implemented it. Aspen approved it in 2007, repealed it in 2010.
So I think we can ask that of the city clerk to get a broader, broader representation regarding ranked choice voting. And so what we're doing just to be clear, it's just going to be a discussion to, we're not making a decision on ranked choice voting during Q1 of 2025. Just to get a little bit more information, and then we can decide there whether or not we want to, do something within ourselves or have it go to vote of the citizens of Englewood. So I think that's where we're at. I know we don't have a full council tonight, but if we want to bring it back, I could put it as mayor's choice for next week to see if members of council still want to move forward with this discussion in Q1 of 2025. So.
Right, and that's okay with me, but I
Okay.
definitely want to make sure that both sides are represented.
Sounds good. Thank you, Member Russell. Anyone else with council member's choice? Go ahead, Member Noonekamp.
I have a question. If we can confirm our holiday schedule for the end of the year, our council calendar has some conflicting information with what I think we have discussed. Mainly, is there a city council study session on December 23rd? Okay, because it is on our council calendar, which also the public can access. So if we could get that updated, that would be great. And I'm talking about the document in the council newsletter, but also it is on the Outlook calendar as well.
Okay.
So I just wanted to be clear about that.
Yeah, thank you, Member Noonekamp. So yeah, we'll have meetings for the first 3 Mondays of December, and then we'll be back on, I don't have the calendar in front of me, but first Monday in January.
That's what I thought as well, but
Yeah.
saw some conflicting documentation, so wanted to confirm that publicly. Thank you.
Perfect. Anything else for members of council? All right, city managers report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a few quick updates. So first, as I informed council twice today of a sinkhole that formed at the corner of Jason and Stanford. It has been filled. We expect it will be open the next day or two to traffic. And a Public Works team is on it and still trying to figure out the exact cause of it and then to follow up from that. I also wanted to piggyback on what Member Ward shared about the Tri-Cities joint meeting that happened last week. On December 9th, you'll have a study session that will have the final draft, and I did add to it the 2 projects that came up. So I added Member Ward's proposal for a project under the governance section relative to exploring the expenditure of opioid funding towards Tri-City projects, and I also added the proposal Member Noonekamp had to figure out how the 3 cities' affordable housing efforts can be more collaborative under the single adult system, which is where most of our housing work exists. So that'll be coming before you for a final study session on December 9th, and it'll be coming before you for consideration of approval by motion in January. And then just in the Thanksgiving spirit, I had a few Thanksgiving announcements. One is to thanks to our many city teams that collaborated with Excalibur Outreach for the 2nd annual Turkey Fest that was held this past Friday, October 22nd. We provided 100 frozen turkeys and sides to families in need, and it was a registration process that was done in partnership with the school district and the police department. And next year, event coordinators are going to work to obtain additional turkeys to try to expand that program. Also, there are a few modifications of facility hours based on the holiday. The library will be closed on Thursday and Friday, but open for normal hours on Saturday and Sunday. The rec center and Malley will be closed on Thursday, but open Friday and then through the weekend for their regular hours. And Broken Tea, weather permitting, will be open on the weekend, but not on Thursday. And just to thank Emily Van Hake, our police resource case manager, for compiling a list of nonprofits and businesses that are providing meals to people over the holidays. And I'll be sending council a list if you're interested in sharing this with your networks. But just to thank a few of those providers: the Integrated Family Community Services, All Health Network, Giving Heart, Chula Restaurant, Graceful Cafe, Cafe 180, and Moving 5280. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Tim. And actually, I did notice earlier today that the library is closing early, 5 p.m. on Wednesday.
I was not told that, so I
Yeah,
will put that
so
in
no,
my
I
notes.
was
Thank
there
you.
earlier today and I noticed it, so. But no, thank you very much for that report, Deputy City Manager. And with that, everyone have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you all next week. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.